You ever notice when something changes, but no one else seems to? Like a word spelled differently than you remember, or a road that suddenly curves the wrong way. Maybe you dismiss it. Maybe you convince yourself it's always been that way. But what if it hasn't? What if you're not imagining things? What if the world around you is shifting, just slightly, just enough, and everyone else is too busy, too tired, too willing to go along with it to even notice? I used to believe that history followed a straight line, that events played out, decisions were made, and time moved forward as expected. But now, I'm not sure. Because something isn't right. I tried to ignore it. I really did. But the more I looked, the more I listened, the more I realized this isn't how things were supposed to happen. I didn't think much of it at first. It was just another inauguration day, another president stepping up for another 4 years. The streets were packed, the usual fanfare playing out like clockwork. I wasn't there in person, of course. I watched from home like most people. The screen flickered slightly, but I chalked it up to a bad connection. Then the speech started. It felt wrong. Not in an obvious way. The words were what you'd expect, mentions of unity, power, progress. But there was something off about the rhythm. A beat too perfect, like a song playing just a little out of sync. He spoke clearly, his hands moving in measured gestures, but he wasn't pausing in the right places. It felt more like a loop than a speech, like a recording being played over itself a fraction of a second behind. I thought maybe I was imagining things, but when I checked Twitter, people were noticing. Is it just me, or is this speech weirdly rehearsed? Anyone else feel like they've heard this before? It's the same speech as 4 years ago. Compare the transcripts. That last one stopped me. Someone had pulled up the speech from his first inauguration. The wording was nearly identical, down to the phrases about making history and a new dawn for the nation. It wasn't copied word for word, but it followed the same structure, the same pacing, the same moments of applause. And then, something even stranger. I checked the comments again, but the tweets were gone. Every single post mentioning the speech being odd had disappeared. The users who posted them were still active, tweeting about completely unrelated things, like they had never noticed anything at all. I tried searching for the transcript again. Error. Could not be found. The official White House YouTube channel had the video, but when I played it back, it seemed normal. No glitches, no strange delays. Had I imagined it? I refreshed my feed. My timeline was filled with praise for the speech. Not just approval, the exact same phrasing, copy-pasted from different users. An inspiring moment for our country. A leader who will carry us forward. History is being made. Something felt scripted about it all. I scrolled further and found a single comment buried under thousands of identical replies. No profile picture, no username, just a blank gray icon and one message. He said it twice. The news moved on. The excitement settled. A few days passed, and I tried to let it go. Maybe it was just my mind playing tricks on me. But the feeling of unease never really left. Every now and then, I'd catch snippets of the speech on TV. Not in full, just sections of it, replayed on random channels at strange hours. Late at night, I heard it coming from my neighbor's apartment. Word for word, the same phrases. But there was no broadcast, no radio, nothing playing. I asked a friend if they had noticed anything strange about the inauguration. They gave me a blank look. What do you mean? It was fine. I pressed a little. Asked if they remembered anything specific about the speech. They hesitated. Their brow furrowed like they were trying to reach for something just out of grasp. Yeah, I mean, it was good, right? Strong message. I asked again. They changed the subject. I decided to check for myself. The full transcript of the speech had been archived online, hidden deep within old forum threads. Someone had uploaded a raw audio file, not the broadcast version, but a direct mic feed. The post warned not to listen too closely. I played it anyway. The first 5 minutes were normal, just words, sentences, the tone measured and composed. Then, right around the 7-minute mark, it happened. A phrase repeated. Not a full sentence, just a few words. I rewound to be sure. It was subtle, barely noticeable. A hiccup in the rhythm. The next minute, it happened again. Another minute, another repetition. Slightly different. The intonation shifted like a second voice was speaking underneath. I slowed the audio down. There were 2 voices speaking at once. One was the speech being given to the public. The other was whispering just beneath it, a half second ahead. The same words, but not quite the same voice. It was deeper, slower, older. I ran the file through a spectrogram to isolate the frequencies. The second voice wasn't his. Or maybe it was, just not yet. I stopped the playback and closed my laptop. I didn't want to hear anymore. That night, I dreamt of a crowd standing in perfect rows, hands raised in silent applause. Their mouths moved, but no sound came out. And above them, standing at a podium too tall for any man, a figure spoke with two mouths. I woke up before I heard what it was saying. I tried to write about it. I tried to post my findings online. Every time I hit publish, the page refreshed and my words vanished. So I'm writing this here, in a place that hasn't been wiped yet. If you're reading this, copy it. Save it. Something about that speech wasn't right. Something heard itself speak twice. And whatever it was, it's still talking. It started with the little things. A new policy here, a revised bill there. Nothing major at first. Headlines about economic shifts, small regulatory tweaks, the kind of stuff that gets lost between bigger stories. But something about it didn't sit right. The language was too vague, the details impossible to find. When I tried to search for specific changes, the results were scattered, incomplete, like someone had scrubbed the archives. Then the bigger changes came. A tax law passed overnight. No debate, no process, just a statement on morning broadcasts that it had already been approved weeks ago. Except no one could remember when. No dates, no signatures, just a consensus that it had always been in motion. Government websites confirmed it. Old records had been updated retroactively. I asked my coworker if they remembered hearing about it before today. They shrugged, barely looking up. Guess I must have missed it. That was the response every time. Not confusion, not skepticism, just acceptance. Like their brains filled in the gap without question. The news changed too. Not the stories exactly. The people. The anchors I'd watched for years seemed off. They sat straighter, blinked less. Their smiles held a little too long, like they were waiting for something. Words came out perfectly rehearsed. No stumbles, no human hesitations. They never coughed, never misspoke, never needed corrections. It was subtle at first, something I couldn't quite articulate, but the more I watched, the worse it got. They all spoke in the same tone, the same cadence. I flipped through different channels, left wing, right wing, independent. It didn't matter. Their voices blended together, almost identical. Even their pauses happened at the exact same moments. Then I noticed something stranger. They weren't wearing earpieces. No teleprompter cues, no devices feeding them lines. Just words spilling out, precise and deliberate, as if they had been rehearsed 1,000 times before. I checked old broadcasts to compare. Something had changed in the past few weeks. Their mannerisms, their expressions, the way their eyes lingered on the camera a little too long before cutting to commercial. I recorded a segment and played it back at half speed. For a moment, just before the anchor spoke, their mouth twitched, like they were catching up to the words already in their head. Then came the glitches. I saw it happen live one evening. The news was running a segment on a new infrastructure deal, the anchor smiling as he delivered the usual empty reassurances. Then, mid-sentence, he stopped, just froze. Not a dramatic pause, not hesitation, just completely still, mouth half open, breath caught mid-word. For 7 full seconds, he didn't move. No reaction, no blinking. The camera didn't cut away. The audience didn't notice. The co-anchor kept nodding as if he was still speaking. Then, without any sign of transition, his mouth snapped back into place, finishing the sentence like nothing had happened. No acknowledgement, no shift in expression. The moment was gone as if it had never occurred. I checked Twitter, but no one was talking about it. I rewound the live stream, but the glitch wasn't there anymore. The clip had been smoothed over. I thought I had imagined it until someone DM'd me. A random account, no profile picture, no name. Check 37 on Channel 6. He said it twice. It wasn't just the news. Traffic signs displayed unfamiliar rules, speed limits set to numbers that didn't make sense, warnings in sentences that didn't read quite right. An entire intersection's streetlights changed their timing overnight, but no public notice explained why. Banks adjusted withdrawal limits with no announcement. Grocery stores rearranged their shelves in identical layouts across the city, even in chains that had no connection to one another. And no one seemed to care. Not confusion, not frustration, just acceptance. like their memories had updated overnight. Then, the White House briefing happened. A press conference. Nothing unusual. The same stage setting, the same podium. The president's press secretary stood as always, smiling too widely, eyes focused on something past the camera. The journalists asked their questions. The responses were seamless, effortless, too precise. Then, near the end, it happened again. A reporter asked about an executive order that had never been announced before, something about foreign trade agreements. The secretary smiled, nodded, then started answering before the question finished. Word for word, a perfect response, as if they had heard the question before it was even asked. No hesitation, no processing time. A 6-second delay between question and response, but the words flowed as if the conversation had been rehearsed, not just anticipated, known. I slowed the video. The moment before the reporter spoke, the press secretary's mouth moved first, just slightly, as if she already knew what was coming. I tried to post about it. The first time, my internet cut out the second I hit publish. The second time, my account refreshed itself, logging me out. The third time, my post vanished the moment it went live. No history of it, no drafts, just gone. I checked my email. A security alert had flagged my account for suspicious activity. It suggested I reset my password. I never requested that. The final sign came last night. I woke up to the sound of my TV on, except I hadn't turned it on. The screen was all news, every channel, different anchors, different sets, but they were all speaking in unison. The same words, the same tone. We are moving forward. We are making history. We are building a better tomorrow. We are. Then they stopped. Their eyes shifted, turning slightly toward the camera, as if they were looking at me directly. And in that single unnatural moment, I knew. They weren't reporting anymore. They were speaking to me. I stopped watching the news after that night. I couldn't. Every time I turned on the TV, it was the same thing. The same voices, the same speeches, the same expressions that lingered too long on the screen. But then, it wasn't just the news. At first, I noticed it at the gym. The mounted televisions above the treadmills all playing different channels, yet every single one of them had him on screen. The same interview, the same cadence. If I muted the audio, I could still tell what he was saying, like the rhythm of the words had been burned into my mind. A day later, it was the gas station. The small screen above the pump flickered to life, playing his speech from last night. The one I had already heard. The same hand gestures, the same half smile, as if the footage had been perfectly preserved, refusing to be replaced by anything new. The next morning, I heard him in my apartment. Not on my TV. I had unplugged it the night before. Not my laptop, not my phone. The sound was coming from somewhere else. A steady, measured voice, muffled as if bleeding through the walls. I followed it, pressing my ear to the vents. The neighbors were playing it. Or maybe they weren't. It wasn't just a single unit. As I listened closer, I realized it was all of them, layered over each other, slightly out of sync. A half-second delay from one room to the next, voices stacking like echoes that weren't supposed to be there. I knocked. No one answered. I knocked again. The sound stopped. The silence that followed was worse. At work, the loop continued. Every break room TV played him. Every office radio hummed with the same interview. Someone at the front desk was watching a live stream, nodding along to his words, but when I leaned in, I realized the timestamp said it was broadcasting live. I checked my phone. The same interview, airing at the same time, on every channel. No station was covering anything else. The scrolling headlines at the bottom of the screen repeated the same sentence. Over and over, no variation, no updates. Just, history is being made. The country is stronger than ever. We are united. We are moving forward. I asked a coworker if they had noticed. They didn't look up from their screen. It's just how things are now. That was the only response I ever got. Not agreement, not dismissal. Just a fact that didn't need to be questioned. I stayed up late that night. I needed answers. I combed through every news website, every political forum, every conspiracy subreddit. Nothing. No one was talking about it. No one even acknowledged the shift. I checked my old posts. They were gone, not deleted, just as if they had never been written at all. Even my emails were cleaned out. Every thread where I had sent links or videos had been wiped. The only thing left in my inbox was a single new message. No sender, no subject. Just a link. I hesitated before clicking. But at this point, I had nothing left to lose. It was an old broadcast recording, a news interview from the first term, something no one would have cared about anymore. But when I played it, I knew something was wrong. It wasn't the same as I remembered. The voice was deeper, slower. Words stretched unnaturally, drawn out like a recording played at the wrong speed. His expression barely changed, like a mask stretched over something underneath. The camera angle stayed fixed, never cutting away, never shifting focus. But the longer I watched, the more I realized his lips weren't matching the words. Not just slightly, not like a delay. They were saying something else entirely. The audio played the speech everyone had heard, the message people had repeated 1,000 times. But if you muted it and just watched, you could see he was saying something different, something I couldn't read. The movements were unnatural, like a second conversation happening beneath the surface, his mouth shaping syllables that didn't match any language I knew. The clip ended abruptly. The screen stayed black. Then, a whisper. Not from the speakers, not from my laptop, from behind me. I turned. My apartment was empty. The windows were closed, the door still locked. But I could feel something watching. Not a person, not an intruder. Something deeper than that. Something woven into the space between thoughts, something I had already let in by listening too closely. I shut the laptop, forcing myself to breathe. I needed to stop. I needed to forget. I didn't watch the news the next day, or the day after. I avoided the break room, ignored the radio, drowned out the voices with music. It worked, for a while. Then last night, my phone screen lit up by itself. No notification, no call, just on, a faint glow against the dark. A video began playing, not from an app, not from my files. Just the screen displaying the same interview I had tried so hard to forget, the same words, the same tone. But this time, he was looking directly at me, not at the camera, not at the audience, at me. And this time his mouth didn't move at all. Tonight's story couldn't have happened without the help of the lovely supporters on screen. Your generosity keeps these stories alive, and I can't thank you enough. If you enjoyed this tale and want to hear more, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss a new upload. And if you want to support the channel and get access to exclusive content, behind-the-scenes updates, and even early story releases, consider joining my Patreon. Every bit helps keep the lights on and the stories coming. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and stay out of the woods.